Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating piece of source material called The False Security of Modern Faith and Divine Truth. As I was reading through this, I was really struck by the compelling contrast it sets up. On one hand, you have an artificial intelligence giving us a strictly data-driven, consensus-based definition of faith, and on the other hand, you have the profound, humbling self-reflection that ancient scripture actually demands from us. It's a remarkable look at how modern society might be completely misunderstanding its own spiritual core. So, to kick things off, the source material starts with a totally modern technology-driven question. How does AI define faith? Specifically, the author prompted an AI system to define what a Muslim is. And, there's a wonderful bit of irony here, right? We rely on AI for literally everything these days, from drafting emails to making grocery lists. So it's kind of darkly funny that we're asking a soulless machine to define something as deeply human and spiritual as faith. But because AI simply synthesizes massive amounts of human data, its answer actually acts as a perfect, unfiltered mirror of what the general public believes today. All right, let's get right into Section 1. AI's definition of faith, basically the consensus view. When prompted, the AI establishes a super baseline definition. It states that, at its core, a Muslim is a person who follows the Islamic religion. It places heavy emphasis on religious affiliation and strict adherence to the teachings of the Quran. It's a very standard textbook starting point that probably sounds pretty familiar to anyone who's ever just looked up a quick definition online. From there, the AI breaks things down into a neat little theological structure. It lists the 6 articles of faith, which represent the core beliefs. So, belief in one God, angels, holy books, prophets, the day of judgment, and divine decree. Notice how incredibly clinically organized and standardized this data is. It reads exactly like an encyclopedia entry. It completely strips away the emotion and just hands us the cold, hard facts of theology. Next up, the AI outlines the formal practices, giving us the 5 pillars of Islam: the declaration of faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage. So according to the general public consensus that this AI has scraped from the internet, well, this is it. This is the definitive structural checklist of the faith. It's purely a series of theological bullet points and formal scheduled actions. It's incredibly mechanical. Which brings us to Section 2, the missing ethical core. Let's look at what the AI leaves out. And here is the crucial, honestly kind of unsettling realization the author brings up about artificial intelligence itself. AI doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have personal convictions. It's literally nothing but the mathematical majority opinion of its training data. It just reflects the general mindset of the people. Therefore, this highly mechanical answer the AI gave, it actually reveals what the vast majority of modern followers are actively prioritizing and focusing on right now. And that leads to a really glaring omission. The AI's focus, which again represents the majority view, is entirely on rules, pillars, and structural practices. But the author points out that there are massive missing elements here. There is absolutely no mention in the AI summary of following truth, or righteousness, or kindness. The very ethical heart that the author argues God actually demands is just gone. The mechanical checklist is front and center, but the ethical soul is completely missing from the consensus data. Let's move on to Section 3, the trap of arrogance and claiming divine rights. To explain why this shift from ethics to mechanics happens, the source points us to a specific ancient scripture. It quotes Surah Fusilat, verse 4150, which says, "When we give him a taste of some of our mercy, after some adversity has touched him, he is sure to say, 'This is my due.'" The author uses this text to illustrate a timeless, deeply ingrained human flaw: arrogance. When we're blessed, our immediate, almost reflexive reaction is to claim those blessings as a personal right that we somehow earned. And the source connects that ancient verse perfectly to a very modern mentality. Today, people often treat the blessing of faith itself as a personal entitlement. They act as if they have a PhD in Quran and theology. And what's tragic is that they use this religious knowledge not as a tool for personal betterment or ethical growth, but as a weapon to assert superiority and just show off to others. The entire practice becomes about stroking the ego rather than genuine devotion. So, the text poses a vital question to all of us. Think about this. Is faith a given right or a humbling gift? Because if faith is truly a gift from God, the only logical response to receiving it is profound thankfulness and deep humility. It shouldn't spark arrogance. A gift isn't earned, and more importantly, a gift can always be taken away if it's abused. That brings us to Section 4, Seeking God in Distress, or as we might call it, transactional worship. This whole arrogant mindset feeds into a really flawed, cyclical human behavior, which is captured perfectly in the very next verse. Surah Fusilat 41:51 states, "When we grant a blessing to a man, he turns away and draws aside, but when any evil touches him, he is full of endless prayers." The author argues that this transactional approach to the divine is one of the absolute biggest pitfalls of modern spirituality. Man, we see the modern-day equivalent of this everywhere. People largely ignore God and spiritual reflection during the good times. Their lives are comfortable, so they just disconnect. But the absolute second that financial, health, or personal problems hit, they panic. They run to perform highly visible acts like Umrah, treating worship like an emergency parachute to save them from a crash, rather than maintaining a steady state of consistent devotion. It's a stark reminder that mechanical practices are way too often used just as panic responses. Which leads us to our final part, Section 5, Recognizing the Divine Signs, a call for reflection. So, where does that actually leave us? The author argues that people are completely adrift right now because they constantly seek out human ideas and human solutions. The text cites Surah Fusilat 41:52, asking who could be more astray than someone who has drifted far away from the truth by rejecting the Quran. Instead of actually reading the scripture to figure out what's required of them ethically, people just rely on the easy consensus, exactly like that AI data we looked at earlier. They want the shortcut, not the profound truth. Because of this massive disconnect, the author views current modern hardships not just as random bad luck, but as direct divine signs. It's a severe wake-up call signaling that society is actively doing wrong things by drifting away from that ethical core. The message here is clear. A mechanical foundation of faith completely crumbles if the ethical foundation underneath it is broken. You can't just check the boxes and expect spiritual security. And that brings us to this incredibly powerful final verse, cited in the source, Surah Fusilat 41:53. "We shall show them our signs in the universe and within themselves, until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth." This captures the author's ultimate plea with stunning clarity. True faith requires profound reflection. Yes, it demands looking outward at the awe-inspiring universe, but more importantly, it means looking deeply and honestly inward at ourselves. So I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought today. When we consider the immense difference between an AI's rote checklist of religious practices and the deep, challenging humility demanded by true scripture, are we truly looking at the signs within ourselves, or are we just checking the boxes? It's a vital question about the intersection of modern consensus and authentic spiritual depth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning what you learn.